Have you ever truly stopped to wonder? Not in passing, but deep down, why some women walk alone? No boyfriend, no husband, not even pretending to search for one. And still, they don't seem lost. They don't look like they're waiting. There's no trace of emptiness, only presence. People often assume it's sadness, or rejection, or a broken heart they never heal from. But the real answer is far less comfortable, far more challenging, because it tears apart the story. The one we were all told, the one that says a woman's value is measured by who stands beside her. When a woman chooses solitude, she's not disappearing. She's arriving, and that arrival doesn't come with claps, or likes, or the comfort company. It comes wrapped in silence, in strength, and a rare kind of freedom, the kind most people have never tasted. She's not lonely, she's discerning. She's not bitter, she's simply done bleeding for people who never knew how to hold warmth in their hands. What unsettles the world isn't her solitude, it's her self-containment. Because when a woman no longer needs a relationship to feel whole, she breaks something invisible. She challenges the myth that love is rescue. She dissolves the old logic of dependency, the one that says a woman is soft, pliable, waiting to be chosen. Instead, she chooses herself. And that is terrifying, not because she's dangerous, but because she can't be controlled. She doesn't crave approval. She doesn't chase connection just to fill a void. There's power in that silence, a presence in that stillness, and a kind of quiet rebellion in every step she takes alone. Carl Jung once said, everything we reject within ourselves doesn't vanish. It waits. It becomes shadow. And maybe these women, the ones who walk alone, are not absent from life, but rather mirrors, silent reflections of the very parts we're afraid to face. They are what many dream of becoming, but fear to embody. They don't raise their voices for affection. They make quiet, conscious choices. They don't seek attention through noise. They pull back to protect what is sacred. They aren't chasing love stories. They're choosing peace. And that peace is misunderstood because in a world addicted to urgency, to constant connection and instant validation, a woman who sits with herself, who chooses quiet over noise, becomes unsettling. She's not following the script. She's rewriting it line by line, with eyes open, heart guarded, and soul intact. While others rush to find someone, she's learning to find herself. And that is a kind of revolution the world still doesn't know how to receive. The woman who walks alone isn't on pause. She's not in limbo. She's operating from a different level, a place where nothing is begged for, it's chosen, where love isn't a survival tactic, it's a sacred exchange, where attention doesn't validate her, because her presence already does. And maybe that's why people try so hard to define her, to reduce her, to explain her away. They call her names, project their fears onto her stillness, say she's cold, too much, too complicated. But what they don't realize is that her silence is not absence, it's fullness. Her distance is not rejection, it's discernment. Her refusal to settle isn't arrogance, it's clarity. She's not waiting for just any kind of love. She's holding space for something real, a love that doesn't shrink her, a connection that doesn't ask her to trade freedom for belonging. Until then, she remains whole, unapologetically, even if the world doesn't understand, even if they say she's hard to love, because deep down, she knows there's a love worth waiting for, one that won't ask her to become smaller, just to fit inside someone else's idea of enough. Maybe you don't understand her right away. Maybe you think it's pride, or ego, or emotional wounds she hasn't healed. But something way down in your chest shifts when you hear her story. There's a question that stirs, a whisper inside you that won't go quiet. What if that silent path she walks isn't loneliness? What if it's strength? What if it's the only road that ever really leads to love? Not the kind that completes you, but the kind that begins with you. The stillness surrounding her isn't emptiness. It's sacred space. It's a room she built, brick by brick, not to keep people out, but to keep herself in. She's been lost before. She's tried becoming what others wanted. She's dimmed herself to fit, softened her voice, folded her edges. Not anymore. Now, she holds herself the way she once hoped someone else would, and the world, still trapped in its fairy tales and formulas, doesn't know what to do with that. But she does, because now she's not surviving. She's sovereign. Carl Jung once wrote that everything we refuse to face within ourselves, we project onto others. And maybe that's why solitude is so misunderstood. Maybe that's why women who choose themselves are often labeled as incomplete, when in truth, they're becoming whole. While most people look outward, hungrily searching for someone to fill the gaps, she turned inward. She entered the quiet corridors of her own mind and faced the shadows no one else could touch. Old pain, childhood silence, the ache of being unseen, the way love sometimes wore the mask of control. She didn't run from any of it. She stood still. Let it all rise. Let it burn. Her solitude isn't a wound. It's a scar that's closed. It's the proof that she did the work. She hasn't stopped believing in love. She's just done mistaking attention for affection and drama for depth. She's tasted chaos, loved until it broke her, begged for crumbs she should have never accepted. But she woke up, and the awakening didn't come as a lightning strike. It arrived as disappointment, again and again, until the pain stopped wounding and started teaching. What you see now isn't coldness. It's emotional maturity. And maturity, true maturity, is intimidating because it demands more than surface. It asks for presence, accountability, and truth. She no longer wants just company. She wants connection. Not someone who shows up with promises, but someone who arrives with presence. That's why some say she's unreachable. Why they call her difficult. Because she doesn't want to be saved. She wants to be seen. And that takes more than charm, more than clever words or curated masks. It takes the courage to meet her where she really lives. Beneath the surface, behind the eyes, deep in the space where most never dare to go. She's not testing anyone. She's just done making herself small. And when a woman stops shrinking, she awakens two things in the world: admiration and fear. Admiration from those walking toward their own wholeness. Fear from those still clinging to their halves, waiting for someone else to complete them. She isn't looking to complete anyone. She's looking to overflow, to pour out her fullness next to someone who has also done the work, someone who has faced their own shadows, someone who doesn't flinch at the weight of truth. Until then, she walks alone, not because fate failed her, but because she refused to abandon herself. This woman isn't hiding. She's protecting what took years to rebuild. There's a world of difference between isolation and preservation, but society still doesn't see that. It praises fairy tales where fulfillment comes in pairs. It mistrusts the woman without a partner, as if her independence is a threat, as if her freedom is defiance. But Carl Jung once said, where convention rules, authenticity dies. And she does not live by convention. She lives by essence. She lives by something quieter, older, truer. She hears the comments. You're too picky. You should lower your standards. No one's perfect. And she just smiles. That slow, steady, almost amused smile. The kind that comes from knowing what took her decades to learn. What they call picky is her bare minimum. She's not chasing perfection. She's holding out for emotional maturity, for real presence, for love that builds, not breaks. And let's be honest, That's not something you find on just any street corner. She makes people uncomfortable, not because of what she says, but because of what she represents. She is living proof that joy, peace, and strength are possible without anyone else's permission, and that shakes the ground. Men who feed on insecurity feel exposed. Women still wrapped in needing approval feel judged, but she's not here to provoke. She's not here to prove. She's simply being. And that authenticity is a mirror too sharp for many to face. She's not in a hurry. She doesn't rush into hands that don't feel safe. She doesn't bend her timing to meet someone else's impatience because she respects her own pace. She's earned it through fire, through silence, through return. And that calm, deliberate rhythm of hers, it disturbs a world addicted to speed. While others chase attention, she craves depth. While others flood the surface with noise, she waits for presence. While many seek to be seen on a screen, she's waiting to be met soul to soul. So when she says no, it's not a tactic, it's truth. When she walks away, it's not to create drama, it's to protect her peace. And when she stays home, instead of spending the night with someone who feels hollow, it's not arrogance, it's alignment. This clarity she carries now, it was earned through loss, through unraveling, through surrender and rebuilding. And that clarity, that quiet revolution, is the reason she no longer lives to please. She lives to be. And maybe what unsettles people the most isn't her solitude, it's the peace she's found inside of it. Carl Jung once said, "Those who look outward dream, but those who look inward to waken." And that's exactly what she did. Her journey inward wasn't gentle. It was raw, unforgiving, necessary. She peeled away the masks. She faced the parts of herself that had been hidden in shame. She descended into the places where old wounds still whispered. And piece by piece, she rebuilt. She no longer needs to be seen through someone else's eyes because she finally sees herself clearly. How many times have you wondered if walking alone meant failure? How often have you felt the need to explain why there's no one next to you? She's felt it too. The pressure, the doubt, the quiet voice saying, "Something must be wrong with you." But one day, she realized something powerful. It's better to walk alone than to be invisible next to someone who only loves a version of you that fits their comfort. That day, she made a vow. Never again would she settle for less than what her soul truly deserves. Her path hasn't been a straight line. There have been moments of doubt, waves of nostalgia, nights where silence felt too loud. But through it all, a quiet strength kept rising. With every decision made in awareness, with every boundary honored, she became something steadier, something deeper. She learned what real love is and what it's not. It doesn't suffocate. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't ask her to shrink. The love she waits for now is a love that frees, that adds instead of subtracts, that holds without owning. And until that love arrives, if it ever does, she chooses to keep growing on her own, not out of bitterness, but out of integrity. She has become the embodiment of Jung's individuation, the process of becoming fully oneself. She faced her shadow, descended into the underworld of her own psyche, stood in the rubble of everything she thought love was, and returned, not broken, but whole. She will never again be half of anything, because now she knows what she's made of. She no longer searches for someone to complete her. She seeks someone who can meet her in her wholeness, not to fill the gaps, but to walk beside her with awareness. And that kind of love, it scares people because it requires more than attraction. It demands emotional responsibility. It asks, have you met yourself first? Have you faced your own silence, your own chaos, your own need to be needed? Most haven't. Most still love out of fear, out of hunger, out of a desperate need to not be alone. But she loves differently now. If she walks alone today, it's because every step carries the echo of what she's learned. Every no is sacred. Every silence is a form of protection. Every absence she chooses is a reminder that love should never be begged for. She no longer performs, no longer explains, no longer justifies her worth, because something in her has shifted, something deeper than identity, stronger than expectation. And when that inner shift happens, everything else begins to rearrange itself, quietly but irreversibly. A woman who has truly met herself, who has come back from her own ashes, doesn't need weapons to be powerful. Her clarity is her strength. She no longer waits to be chosen. She does the choosing. And that reversal, that quiet shift in agency, disorients a world still clinging to control. She's crossed a threshold one she can't unsee, because once you realize that the deepest love begins within, you stop mistaking attention for affection. You stop confusing desire with devotion. You stop settling for half-light. When your soul was born for fire, there's something sacred in how she moves now. She doesn't chase validation. She doesn't need applause. Her confidence doesn't roar. It radiates. It pulses in silence. It walks into a room and realigns the air, not with force, but with depth. This isn't magic. It's not mysticism. It's the energy of someone who has survived her own becoming and returned in peace, not because she's conquered every fear, but because she stopped letting fear make her small. She doesn't reject love. She simply refuses to bend for the kind that asks her to disappear. She wants love, yes, but not one built on illusion, not one that demands silence or softness at the cost of truth. She wants the kind of love that makes room for all of her, shadow and light, joy and sorrow, quiet and storm, because she's learned anyone who only loves your prettiest parts hasn't learned how to love, and anyone who demands constant sweetness hasn't yet tasted the beauty of bitter, the kind of bitter that grows things. She's too whole to settle for halves, too free to be held in emotional cages that call themselves comfort, too attuned to her own heart to waste time in places where her depth isn't welcomed. And still, she feels everything. She's not numb. This path she's on, it's not paved in ease. There are lonely nights, moments of softness that ache to be met, desires that rise, unfulfilled. But even when it hurts, she stays loyal to herself. Even when it's quiet, she honors the stillness, because she knows there's no going back to the woman she used to be, the one who begged to be loved, even if it cost her soul. Something inside her broke, and it was that very break that finally set her free, because sometimes, only in collapse, does the soul remember its true shape. Carl Jung once said, "The tree that grows to heaven must also send roots into hell." And that's exactly what she did. She descended into the raw, aching caverns of her own story, faced pain that wasn't just hers, but inherited, passed down through generations, of women taught to settle, to serve, to stay silent. She broke those patterns. She said no, again and again, to the relationships that mirrored the same old wounds. And the world, it pushed back, tried to convince her she was wrong, too harsh, too closed off, too demanding. But she didn't flinch. First came the doubt, then came the awareness, and finally the invulnerability. Because once you've lived inside your own abyss, you stop fearing emptiness. You stop calling silence your enemy. She learned to nourish herself, to warm her hands by the fire of her own presence. She's not unreachable. She simply no longer allows invasion. There's a vast difference between opening your heart and letting someone tear it apart. Yes, she still opens, but only for those who arrive in truth, not with rehearsed lines or shallow intentions, or temporary warmth disguised as love. She's seen too much, felt too deeply, waited too long. Her intuition now, sharp, immediate. It doesn't second guess anymore. Her body, her energy, it's a filter. She feels the weight of presence and the hollowness of performance. And when she senses the latter, she walks away without a fight, without a speech, because her boundaries are no longer defenses. They're declarations, declarations of worth, of healing, of sacred space. This transformation she's undergone, it's not cosmetic, not performative. It's archetypal. It's as if she's remembered something ancient, something wild, a deep knowing that women weren't made to be molded, but to overflow. And in tapping into that truth, she awakens something fierce, something rooted, a wild woman, instinctive, emotionally sovereign, a woman who may walk alone, but is far from lost, because she walks in communion with something greater, with her own becoming, with her soul's rhythm, steady, sacred, and entirely her own. They'll try to label her cold, distant, arrogant, but nothing sticks, because she no longer lives to fit in. She lives to expand. She doesn't fight for attention. She doesn't beg to be seen. She is the presence, the frequency, the shift in the room that needs no introduction. She's not waiting to be chosen anymore. She does the choosing, and that throws everything off balance, because the world still clings to its old patterns, where the feminine waits, serves, softens, yields, but she's not there anymore. She's crossed a line the old rules can't reach, and on the other side, she discovered that love, real love, doesn't come to rescue. It comes to celebrate. It doesn't fill a void. It meets fullness with fullness. When a woman reaches that space within herself, nothing outside of her holds more power than the truth she now carries in her chest. That truth doesn't shout. It moves in silence. It speaks in how she closes a door, without bitterness, in how she quietly disappears, from places that no longer feel like home, in how she smiles, genuinely, gently, even when no one's watching. She's learned being alone is not a punishment. It's a vow of loyalty to her soul, and a soul that is awakened doesn't shrink, doesn't submit, doesn't chase. It simply is. Still, the world keeps trying to convince her that she's missing something, keeps offering her distractions, plastic versions of love, fairy tales dressed in neediness. But she sees behind the curtain now. She knows it was never about finding someone. It was always about never losing herself again. And when that truth takes root, everything shifts. Desire becomes discernment. Loneliness becomes sacred stillness. Waiting becomes a conscious path. What once hurt now teaches. What once held her back now liberates. And somewhere deep inside, you feel it too. That stirring, that ache, that memory of a version of you you've nearly forgotten. Or maybe a version you've only just begun to meet. That woman who lives alone, the one who doesn't fit the mold. She isn't just a person. She's a symbol of emotional freedom, a quiet revolution, a reminder that rebuilding is possible. That joy doesn't need an audience. That peace can come without permission. She doesn't walk ahead of others. She doesn't walk behind. She walks her own path, carved through choice and pain and sacred self-return. And along that path, she leaves sparks, little fires, whispers of strength for others who are waking up too. So if something inside you stirred while listening, if a part of you leaned in, held its breath, and recognized itself, then maybe you're ready for a new kind of love, not the kind that saves you, but the kind that meets you right where you are, a love born from silence and presence and truth, a love that can't be negotiated, or earned through performance, or chased into existence. And if that love hasn't come yet, maybe it's because first you had to become the woman who no longer accepts less than she was born to hold. If this message found you, don't rush past it. Don't silence what's stirred. Let it echo. Let it breathe. Let it rise. Because sometimes hearing the right words at the right time isn't just inspiration. It's memory. The memory of who you were before the world convinced you to forget.